Just went live.
All right. Well, good evening. I'm going to call this meeting together, meeting to order of the Affordable Housing and Community Equity Development Commission. It's November 18th, 2021. And we'll start with a roll call. And I am Kathy Ebner, Chair of the Commission, and Nancy Lipson, Vice Chair, is in attendance. Terry Bond, Commissioner, is in attendance. Elijah Herrick-Blaine is in attendance. Pat Sheridan is not in attendance. He's not able to make it tonight. And also in attendance is Teresa Wellman, our staff liaison. So we're going to start with approval of our September meeting minutes and we also need to approve our October meeting minutes. So I guess let's do them one at a time. Hopefully you all are in receipt of those meeting minutes.
Yes.
Any questions, concerns, changes, edits? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the September 2021 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second? Second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
And also a motion for the October meeting minutes.
So moved.
And then a second.
I'll second it.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that housekeeping business is done. So we have two agenda items for this evening. First, we're going to be starting with a presentation from Teresa Wellman relative to the community block grant funding. And that will also, we're going to be holding a public hearing, opening a public hearing for that as well. So Teresa, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it over to you.
Okay, well, the city gets money from HUD called Community Development Block Grant Funds, and those are given to us every year. And we do a plan to spend it, and then at the end of the year, HUD expects us to report back and let them know how we did in spending the money and meeting our goals, but we're also required to let the public know. So this is what this public hearing is about. The other purpose for this public hearing is to solicit ideas from people on how the residents feel we should use our block grant money for the upcoming fiscal year. So Madeline, if you can put the presentation up. I'm going to go over what is in our annual report to HUD. The report is called the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, or CAPER, and it covers July of last year to June of this year. Next slide. So basically, the city has, whoops, can you go back one? Good, thank you. Every 5 years, the city does a plan where we talk about our goals and objectives, and then we have to do an annual plan also. So the purpose of this report is to take a look at what how the city spent its money. Did we meet all the regulatory requirements? Did we meet our goals and objectives? Basically, how did we do? So this year we had in the year 2021. We had a budget of $305,000. Of that amount, $266,000 was entitlement money and $38,000 was prior year funding that we got as program income. Our total expenditures for the period totaled $503, and you're wondering, well, if we only got $305, how did we spend $503? And that is because we got additional money through the CARES Act. Next slide. So basically what we have to do is report accomplishments. We report them on a 5-year period and on a 1-year period. And the accomplishments come under the categories of affordable housing, homelessness, special needs, community development, economic development, administration. I'm not going to go through this chart, but basically the city was very successful in meeting pretty much all of its goals. The only goal where we fell short were the ones under affordable housing, and that was because both of these projects were they were rehabilitation projects. And all the rehabilitation projects were impacted by COVID in terms of like getting contractors, getting supplies, being in people's homes. So those two goals, we were just short of meeting them. One was our homeowner rehabilitation program, and we were able to do 2 out of 3 of those. And our affordable housing rental units rehabbed, we were able to do most of those. There was only one project that slowed us down. And that again was because they couldn't get the products to do the work. So the rest of them, we met all our goals. If anybody's interested in looking in this in detail, you can look at the caper. It's on the city's website in the Office of Community Development. Next slide. So this is kind of a listing of all what we did with the money. And again, I'm not going to go through them individually, but these are all listed, and this information is all in the caper. Next slide. The city did get money from HUD for COVID-related projects. The grants totaled $479,000. We expended at the end of June, we had expended $138,000. And this is a listing of all of the projects that were funded with COVID funds. Next slide. Again, this is a more detail of what the money was used for and what the projects were. And this is a listing of the ones where we actually finished and spent the money. Next slide. The other thing we have to report in the caper is how we leveraged funds from other than HUD funds. And Arundel Community Development Services, which manages our housing rehabilitation program, was able to leverage $111,000 in funding from DHCD through the Maryland Housing Rehabilitation Program and the lead paint funds. So what this does is it allows us, typically a rehab of a house to bring it up to code costs around $65,000. And we only allocate $30,000 of our CDBG funds. And then ACDS leverages money from these programs so that we can get up to $65,000 if we need to. The other money leverage was from Anne Arundel County's Continuum of Care program. This program is a program that manages all of the chronically homeless programs throughout the county, and they were awarded $2 million plus, and that money is then allocated to all the organizations that provide services to the homeless. Next slide. One of the other things that we have to talk about in the caper is we have to talk about public housing and how our public housing is going. So this is a listing. What the Housing Authority has to report to us is what actions they've taken to address the needs of public housing. And so our Housing Authority is provided this information. They are moving along, of course, with the Newtown 20 project. During the period we're reporting, they had demolished the 78 apartments. They've gotten all their financing together. They've already started construction, and they expect to begin leasing up in early 2022. And there's a listing of all the funding that went into the Newtown 20 project. Next slide. Continuing with that, they have made significant progress towards getting to the point where they can start rehabilitating the Morris Blum mid-rise, which is in the down at the end of Clay Street. It's about 150 senior apartments. They've submitted their tax credit application. They expect to go to closing, and rehab activities are expected to begin in the summer of 2022. Next slide. The other thing that Housing Authority has to do is they have to tell us what actions they've taken to encourage public housing residents to become more involved in management and participate in home ownership. So this is a listing of all the things that HAC has been doing to meet that goal. They've been holding monthly meetings at Blum to keep the residents up to date on the redevelopment. They've been working with many residents to increase participation in home ownership through their family self-sufficiency program. They've been partnering with Wells Fargo to hold educational sessions regarding budgeting, et cetera. They've been working with the Community Action Agency. They actually qualified 2 residents for Housing First homeownership vouchers, which is quite an accomplishment. And they recently had a graduate from Robinwood purchase their first home in July. Next slide. Is that the last slide? So that's basically it. Like I said, there's a lot more information in the caper, and you're welcome to read it. It's posted on the City of Annapolis.gov website under the Community Development Office in Planning and Zoning. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
That was
Can I
very
ask one-
detailed.
Can I
Go
ask
ahead,
one
Carrie.
question? The last bullet about the 2 families that graduated and worked with Wells Fargo to become first-time home buyers. Are there houses available for them? Is the market, I guess that's the question I'd have. You go through all of that. Is there housing? Are they looking at housing?
Well, the 2 residents, they qualified for the voucher. So they're in the process of shopping for a home. I would assume that there's stuff out there because somebody did actually purchase a home. So
Good.
The way
I don't know what the income levels are. You know, if the family's like at the top, you know, at the 80%, there's possibilities to buy
Okay.
houses,
Well,
and not necessarily in Annapolis. They may have purchased outside.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, the way I understood that homeownership voucher to work is that it actually works, and Elijah, you may know about this as well, similar to rental vouchers. So
Yep.
that they're actually, you know, they're just like they're making the tenant pays their portion of rent, and then the voucher pays the rest, and that's true with the mortgage as well.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think that they've been trying for a long time to get this process going. So,
It's excellent.
Yeah, that's really exciting that they've got an illustration of how to do that now and can really use that as a template. That's great.
Yeah, that is great.
Excellent, excellent.
So Teresa, so we need to hold a public hearing, and having never done this before, what do we have anybody that wishes to? I guess I will hold open. I will call open right now the public hearing.
Right.
Is there anybody in the wings? Do you know? Maybe Madeline could tell us.
Madeline? Did
Sorry,
Did-
what was the question?
Is there anybody waiting in the wings to speak at the public hearing?
No.
all righty. Well then.
Simplifies things, doesn't it?
Having that
Teresa,
be
can
the
you say
case,
if-
I will now close the public hearing. Okay. It's been open and closed.
Kathy, I'm sorry. Teresa, can you say just a bit more? So as part of the task force, the housing task force, there's a lot of conversation about kind of after, Newtown and Blum and all of that. You said a bit there about kind of the aspects that this will support on that. In terms of overall timeline with that, could you just help educate me on that a little bit?
Timeline wise, and Kathy can help me because she's actually developed projects. I would say from start to finish, don't they take about 4 years?
Yeah, it takes a while. Was that your question, Elijah?
that
The
your
time-
question?
Yeah, I mean, I know we've seen demo on
Newtown.
Newtown.
Newtown's demo. Newtown's under construction. In fact, if you go take a ride out there, it looks like it's moving right along.
So, okay, that's a great suggestion. I haven't taken a ride out there in a
Yeah,
little.
you can. Yeah,
So-
it's well, last time I went out there, and it was a while ago. They had everything framed, and it
Great.
was
Oh, good.
all
And then
framed
what's
up.
the timeline? It's really Blum. That's really the one that
Well, see, again, like I said, it takes probably about from start to finish almost 4 years. So they're at right now. They've hired their partner, and they're now working with the residents and
Okay.
bringing them up to date. They're probably, my guess would be, it said that, and don't forget, this only goes up to June 30th. This covers up to June 30th. So
Right.
they could be further along now, but as of June 30th, they were filing they were putting in their applications for the different programs, and they were in the process of design. So they've got to put together a relocation plan,
right.
all this. So the last time I talked to them, they were having the regular monthly meetings with their residents, and they were waiting to hear back on all these different places where they applied for money.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say from the point that the 4% application is submitted, at that point, they have all their sources of funding identified and tied down. They've
Right.
got, all their design plans put in place. By the time they actually submit the application, in a perfect world, be able to start construction within 12 months, from that time frame. Takes the state agency a few months to review their application, and then, they gotta, work towards getting to closing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's a
and
year
they have a
construction.
time. They actually have a time limit, right?
Yeah, they do.
Of
They do.
how quickly
Yeah.
they need to get under construction.
Right.
So it's really just getting to the application submission. That's what really can take some time and get bogged
that
down,
takes
especially when you
time.
have gaps in your financing and you're trying to, find sources to
Put
fill
all in
it.
place. Right.
So it doesn't sound like, have they actually submitted the application, Teresa?
It said that back in June they had submitted the 4%
Okay.
tax credit.
Well,
And they're-
yeah,
They're pretty
then they-
far along then.
then they are pretty far along. Yeah.
And the community builders this is not their first rodeo. So
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're also moving through the rental RAD. They're also moving through RAD.
Okay. Right. Right. Okay.
So-
That's helpful. Thanks.
All
I have
right.
a quick question, not necessarily on the caper itself, but are you getting a sense, Teresa, that over the last year things have started to move a little bit easier at HUD?
Haven't gotten any sense about
Oh.
HUD.
Okay. All right. Never mind.
No, so same old, it's,
Same old department. Okay,
yes, nothing's really changed. I mean,
Okay.
they're understaffed, and,
Right. Okay.
but things are. I
You
never
never
got a
mind.
sense of any change when the previous secretary was there either, so.
Teresa, is there anything in particular? I've worked really closely with two of the senior advisors to Secretary Fudge, Richard Cho and Peggy Bailey. Peggy Bailey actually lives in Davidsonville.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
she
so
does.
if there was ever a need to kind of try and figure out a way to have a voice that might be able to just help with liaisoning relationships
Mhm.
at the field office or whomever.
Right,
Yeah.
it would mostly be hacker related and not related to us.
Okay, so it'd be through
Because we're
PA.
just
Yeah,
chugging
Peggy-
along.
Peggy has a pretty broad portfolio. I mean, she has a pretty broad experience, so she knows all the actors in all over, since she was at Center for Budget and Policy Priorities
Right.
and at Corporation for Supportive Housing, and she's really been through
Right.
the gamut.
Right, like, for example, now we still haven't heard choice neighborhoods.
Right.
Waiting to
Okay.
hear on that. That's late. I mean, not late, but we thought we would hear in November, October, November. And I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I thought I heard that they're already putting out the application for the next choice neighborhoods thing, and they still haven't announced the winners. So
Oh.
how do you know whether you should apply or not? You know,
Right.
That's fine.
Okay.
you don't know if you've gotten, you know, so anyway.
All right. Are there any more questions for Teresa on the keeper thing? If not, we'll move on to the to our next agenda topic, which is old business, really, when Elijah visited us as a guest, which he now is an official member of. We talk with you about the Housing Affordability Task Force findings report, and you kind of went through that with us. And so, yeah, doing a follow-up on that, and you wanted to share kind of some more information about.
Yeah, thanks. So I had a conversation with Nancy as well as Teresa at a certain point about some of the work around, I have a man that I know, Joel Dunn, who works for, I believe the organization is the Chesapeake Conservancy. And, as an environmentally focused organization, they are really interested in land conservation and ensuring that, the limited space that is available for development is done responsibly. And so I really had an opportunity to sit down with him and talk with him about the benefits of ensuring that we try and do as dense development as possible in order to really maximize the impact of development and get the most out of it that we can, given the affordability challenges that we have. He's been really supportive of that. And he's got a board member that was involved in the establishment of the Community Land Trust up in Baltimore. And John Griffith is this man's name. He used to work, I believe he was chief of staff for Governor O'Malley. And he had an associate of his put together a briefing document on just community land trusts in general, but also down into Maryland. So the authorization language is established at the state level so that we could move forward. I think it's relatively I think it's relatively safe to think that we could get some sample legislative language. I know there's been interest from members of the council in pursuing this, and in the conversations that I've had with Alderman Gay as well as Alderman Savage and the mayor, I think the recognition that they have about this is that this might be a relatively low cost, high impact way of making some progress on the recommendations of the task force and often many times of the recommendations of this commission. So what I recognize is that the limitation of the task force was that it was time limited. But the benefit of this commission is that it is a perpetual entity that can carry forth some of those priorities. And so as we look to those recommendations from the task force, this is the one that I just am wondering, what could we possibly as a commission be doing to really kind of advance some of those recommendations of the task force in a prioritized and strategic manner. And for me, this seems to be the logical first one. So I'm just curious to get other people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, you had mentioned that before when you spoke with us, that you really thought this land trust was, one of the major, most significant, I guess, the first priority that makes the most sense. And we had talked also about the, seems to me that the Spa Road site that the city is just about ready to vacate really seems like a perfect dovetail, with this idea.
Absolutely, Kathy.
Now, in doing our research, though, and I have done, some reading on it, it's rather complicated, and it does seem like it would necessitate, expert assistance, right? Some sort of consultant help.
And I think that's why I say kind of lower cost, right? Is I think I feel like the pieces could be there, but you're right. What we really need is someone with expertise who can be dedicated to it and really drive and stitch it together. And there was a man who I'd like to think I could track this information down, who came and spoke very briefly when we presented the task force findings to the city, who spoke about his work going around to varying locations of the country to establish CLTs. So I feel like, I know that that's out there. And I know, for example, organizations like the Center for Community Change also can provide that, So I feel like that could be maybe the work that we do, is to maybe try and find that.
Well, also, I think Melissa at the Housing Authority has experience with the land trust too. So she might be able to recommend somebody, or, talk, and Pat can certainly follow up on that from his perch on the board and their new nonprofit.
And I think in the conversations that I've had with Melissa about it, she's been supportive. But I think she's very supportive of it. She was very supportive of this notion of when we were drafting the recommendation.
Right.
Force,
Work with them.
Yeah. I think my gauge of where Melissa is at on this is that she wants to, I feel like we're kind of in a you go first, no, you go first, no, you go first situation. And I feel like that might be the role that this commission can play, right? Is I would understand if I put myself in the shoes of the council and the mayor, that they don't want to commit any general funds or funds in any way until they know that perhaps the housing authority is ready to move on in some way. Well, Melissa feels justifiably, I could put myself in her shoes and feel the same way. So that's where I wonder if, as the commission, we could be that facilitating agent, if you will, to really try and draw folks together in a coordinated fashion and really kind of get everyone to say yes at the same time, at the same thing, with an idea as to where, after we say yes to working with X entity or individual, that then, okay, the next goal is for, in my mind's eye, it would be to, until a independent 501c3 can be established with bylaws, a board, etc., staffing, that perhaps we would be able to utilize the umbrella and tax exempt status of the housing authority and stand it up underneath as a separate entity that then in time would be able to be dovetailed off. But I think, Kathy, my concern is that, just as you pointed out, there's actions on the Spa Road stuff moving forward, right? And what my fear is that we will miss this very unique opportunity, because one of the big things that we talked about on the task force is that there's just not a lot of land.
Right.
There's not a lot of land that's out there.
Well, and I do think my perception is that, and I could be wrong, it's just my opinion, but that there's some concern or maybe even confusion over the idea of using HACA's new entity, even in the way that you described, in that, that it would be possible to do that and have that subsidiary entity be totally separate in time and not, tied to HACA. But I think that feels a little uncomfortable, I think, is my perception. And the desire would be to create a totally separate entity for purposes of the land trust from the HACA.
So that's helpful to hear. Is it your sense that there would be perhaps, I guess for me conceptually, it's more trying to find a host entity, recognizing that. And so if given what you've said, okay, hey, maybe hack is not the right place for any number of reasons, right? The reasoning almost is moot, right? If there's
Right.
not comfort, there's not comfort, and I get that.
Well, then,
And
and
I
then
do.
that just makes the task all the much, bigger hill to climb, because now
So
you're talking.
that's the point that I'm driving at, right? Is so then, okay, how can we then? I mean, it's virtually impossible to create the organization, do the governance structure, get the land, all of those elements combined it's just not feasible, right? It's going to be challenging enough. So yeah, Terry, any thoughts?
Well, no, I'm just wondering, because what you said is true. We're a small city. To create that just for the city, how many projects are we going to have? And, does it really make sense? But is there anything in the county or the state, any organizations that we might be able to work with? Maybe it's not, and I'm just thinking, maybe it's not a land trust, but there's a lot of groups out there who do project, and I'm not talking, not as, I don't just mean a not-for-profit developer. I mean, an organization that promotes
The
not just,
development of housing.
I know there's the smart growth group out of DC. I don't think they do things necessarily. I don't know. Do they have 501c3? I mean, is it possible to get a group that already has maybe 501c3 that could work with us? I'm just throwing that out because it's a lot easier to work with an organization that exists than to have to create a new one to do what we want to do. That's all.
That's
I also think it's important, before we start talking about all these administrative processes, to get buy-in of the concept from the various people who are going to have to sign off on this kind of thing. For example, you're going to a meeting of the 30 of the whatever they're called, District 30 tonight, right, Kathy?
Yep.
So is there a champion among them, like Sarah, or I don't know who else?
Yeah,
she'll probably be there, right, Sarah? But
yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think buy-in does. I think you're right. I think buy-in, because the fact is, it is gonna cost money to set up the entity.
Right, and I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're at a point.
We don't
yet
even
where
know what
we
we're
need to be
doing
worried about the.
Well, it's sort of like the purpose is, to Terry's point, there's only so much land
Right.
that could be dedicated to the land trust. But could the MPDU units end up being dedicated there? I don't know the answer to that. Kind of like from a legal structural standpoint, whether or not that would work. But I
thought that what we were going to do was, the next step was going to be Alderman Gay was going to bring all this to the city council in a work session.
Well, our recommendation to his committee did not include this land trust concept. So, I think if we want to bring this to his committee, then we need to develop this recommendation.
Sort of the next step.
Presented to him.
And I'm going to throw something out, and this again, just crazy, just thinking out loud. It's awful. It's much easier to sell a project if you have something of what it can look like.
Yeah. We don't even have a project.
Well, what I'm thinking is, like, I don't know about Neighborhood Design Center with Enterprise Foundation. And even the Chesapeake Architect, whatever the organization, there are groups out there that could look at the site and give us some recommendations about what could happen on it. Once you have that, we have an idea about what kind of density we might be able to get, because there's a lot of environmental issues on that site. So I guess I think a land trust is a good idea, but this particular project, maybe we need to think more about what it could be and then try and move forward with that. I'm just, because we're just talking concepts now without really knowing what it could be. So
yeah, and actually, I think in my mind, when I went in past and when I've been thinking about this land trust, I've always done it in my head in conjunction with choice neighborhood. that, you know, if the city and HACA were to be awarded a planning grant, you know, then you could possibly use some of that money to establish a land trust to, you know, hold land that's carved off in that area for that use.
And so
But
that was a part of the recommendations of the task force as well, right? Was to try and have a coordinated, you know, supportive application for CNI, you know, and I hear exactly what you're saying. And I think that seems right. I think the one thing that I'm, you know, the biggest thing is you know, just given the limited amount of land, anything that we can do to ensure that parcel gets as many affordable units as possible. I mean, it would be just a tremendous loss of opportunity to the community
Which is why perhaps the most important thing at this point is to work with Dewan,
yeah,
others,
yeah.
to make sure that they don't go off half-cocked with some other proposal before really considering affordable housing.
That's a helpful reminder. That's a helpful reminder. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we really have to, I think we have to do our work with the city, so that they don't, you know, sort of take the easiest route, which is find the first person who can develop it.
Right.
Right, but I
First
still am having, because I have to implement all the stuff that you're talking about. Eventually, it's going to come down to implementation. And
Right.
it's our office and planning and zoning that's going to have to implement it. I'm still having a problem with understanding setting up a land trust and setting all this up before you even have a project.
I
Well,
think the key
well,
is that
Why would you do that?
for me, it's because it's a legal structure that would ensure no matter what, that it would be used for affordable purposes. And I think, you know, just as we are talking about Newtown and Blum taking multiple years up, you know, sometimes in an ideal situation, maybe a minimum of 3 to 4 years. I think we can all attest to the fact that there are lots of projects out there that go for much longer periods of time. And so I guess my concern is that given the limited amount of space, unless we have some structure that allows for there to be security in knowing that that land will go to an affordable housing development, then, you know, we are putting ourselves at risk of that land being used for some other purpose. And I think that's the thing that I want to ensure is that we minimize that risk.
Well, I don't think we have to actually put into existence a land trust. We need a commitment from the city without having a land trust or without having any structure. If we get a commitment from the city that that's what they intend to do with it.
I think I think commitments can go a long way. I think commitments can go a long way. I also would offer that commitments can change depending upon leadership.
The mayor has just been reelected and the council has just been reelected.
Those are great points.
And I think we have to do our homework first without worrying about whether we establish a land trust or not at this moment.
Can't they pass a bill? Can't they pass a piece of legislation that states the intent to develop that land for affordable housing? So
Some
That
kind
would
of
be a resolution.
but do resolutions have the point of law? I mean, something
It
that
would be a sense of it would be a sense of the council that the sense of the council is that, you know, any future development on this parcel should be
Right.
But it's not an ordinance.
That's right. I guess that's the underlying point that I'm trying to make. But Nancy, you make a very excellent point, you know, and that is, you know, yeah, we just got through an election cycle. We know who the leadership is in place now, you know, so, I mean, that's a very fair point. That's a very fair point.
So I would explore that first. And
that makes sense. That makes sense.
What kind of commitments we can get. I mean, I don't know what the process is for Spa Road or how quickly it's moving or, you know, I just don't know. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of sort of getting in line and making sure that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
Isn't the your report and aren't we already in line? Isn't
For
this site
some-
already in line for affordable housing?
Not-
What? It
No.
should be. I
It
mean,
should be, yeah, it should be.
That's the point.
That's the
That's
point, right?
let's get number one and get in line.
So that's ultimately the point. I think, Nancy, the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this conversation, though, is your underlying point, right? Which is that leadership's in place. We're on the other side of an election cycle now. Let's do our homework. Let's do our due diligence. Let's wrap back around. Let's solidify support. Let's talk about alternatives to really ensuring that we do have a collective consensus among leadership as to to what should be done.
Right.
And it's not, I think, Terry, it was your point. I mean, that is a brownfield project if there was ever a brownfield project. So
Right.
there's going to be a ton, but I guess I would offer that environmental remediation aspect is only going to lengthen the amount of time that project is going to take, right? And so I guess I would just offer that kind of, I would offer that comes back to my point, which is that, that's going to extend the runway on a potential project on that site. So,
Well, and when we're talking about site, I think we need to be clear too. So, the site as you're going into town you're on Spot Road on the right-hand side
there, inside
where
there,
Bizzuto was going to develop,
Right.
he ran into major environmental concerns. My understanding was so much so that it did not support residential development. It could be overcome for other kinds of development, but the environmental issue there did not support residential development. That was I could be wrong, was my understanding. The parcel land on the left where the Public Works is now
yes.
does not have those same environmental concerns. And
Right.
so, that could move more quickly. And back when, the whole Public Works location debate was going on, when Bizzuto was entertaining building on the right-hand side, there was some, general comments made about how the left-hand side could support workforce housing. It was talked about working artist housing at one point. And I don't know if anybody ever laid out any plans, but I guess my point there is, I think that parcel could go quicker. And now what's interesting is I was looking in SStat for information on that parcel, and I could not locate it in the land records, any information on that parcel. And I traded emails with Sally Nash about that. And Teresa, you were involved in those emails too, trying to get more information. What is the size of the parcel?
Right.
What's the square footage? And other metrics on it. And I simply couldn't find the land records, which was odd, I thought.
Well, one of the things really I think needs to be done is, we have a new planning director for at least 6 months,
Right.
Mike Malinoff. So I think there's a point at which we need to brief him on all of this.
Well,
And
I
it's
just
not
really
as though he-
appreciate-
And it's
Not-
gonna know, he's the one that's gonna actually know what's going on because he's the
Right.
planning director and he talks to the public works director and,
Right.
he's,
And he's
So he
certainly
needs-
not new to what's going on in Annapolis. So
right,
he's
but
been
I
around
mean,
forever.
right, and he's familiar, so I think it would be a good idea to maybe have brief him about this. As the next step, just to inform him of what the intentions are, and so he can keep, an ear out and, hear what's going on, if there's any chatter.
Do you think it also makes sense just to sort of formalize our request that the city not move on that land until we've had a chance to really weigh in and give a full recommendation?
Well, that's why I think we should sit down and have a talk with Mike.
Mike Malinoff.
Well, I was
Yeah,
thinking
I
more in
agree.
terms of,
Agree.
I was thinking more in terms of making a request to
the
Alderman
council.
Gaines.
No, afterwards.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
talking about first having a chat with Mike,
With
get
Mike,
some,
And
you
then
know, get
going
some,
to the council.
yeah, I mean, I think we really need to have the planning director's support on this,
Yeah.
before we
Well, I want to be conscious
Since
of
we
the
have a new
time.
planning director.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to be conscious of the time, but I feel like we've just identified maybe the first step,
Right.
right?
We'll
And
go-
and it's in line with Nancy, what I feel like your point was, right? Which was go around, solidify our support, let's build some overarching consensus here, and then let's move forward to and continue forward on that. So Teresa, might that be something that you could help facilitate for us?
Right, yeah, I'll try to set something up, but while I
That'd be
have
great.
your attention is we do have somebody that did want to testify that somehow or another, Madeline, I don't know what the problem is, but he can't seem to get in. Have you been looking at my, because I don't want to let this meeting go without giving him a chance to say something.
Yeah, so
Can
from
I
what
send?
I read, it looked like at no point like he was on the Zoom link, he was just on the YouTube. And so I am like, I could read his comments, either what
Okay.
he typed for the form submission or the chat, or if we send him the link, he could join the Zoom and give it live. Either way would have resulted in it being entered into the public record.
Well, I'd like to have him have an opportunity to join the Zoom and give it live, since he's been hanging around all this time waiting and he did sign up. If you could do that, that'd be great.
Well, you have his contact information.
Okay. Well, what I was gonna do is I was just gonna go ahead and send him my invitation. Will that let him on the Zoom? I just
Yeah,
did.
as long as it has.
Okay, I just said it. I just sent
Okay.
it to him. So,
But Kathy, you have to leave, right?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'll stay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna, again, silly. We're not a separate entity. We're doing work for the city. The commission
Right.
asked us to come up with recommendations for affordable housing.
Right.
And this is the best one we can find. So I don't think it's out of, I mean, we need to tell them that this is it.
This is what we want to do.
This
Right.
is what that makes the most sense, and that you can do something with it, and it needs to be top priority. So I'm not scared of saying that, because that's our job, you know.
why are you getting the impression that we're scared of saying?
Because we got to
that?
go to the planning director first, and then we got to do this.
Well, no, it's just,
No,
well, we don't have to go to the planning director. All I'm doing is suggesting that it might be a good idea to, Sally was in on all this stuff. She took part and she's gone now. And I think that the planning director should just be briefed. If you want me to go ahead and brief him, fine, I can do that. If you don't want to if you don't want to
No,
participate.
we only meet
I'll
we
brief
only meet once a month, and it's just we've been
And we're
talking.
not meeting, and we're not meeting in December.
There you go.
So,
There you go.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's why, and I'm not sure if, Housing and Human Welfare Committee's meeting in December. I think that they might be. But I just think it would be good to put something in writing and just say, this is something that we really feel strongly about, and we are, pursuing getting more information, and we will, formalize our recommendation to
Okay,
you.
so and who
We'll
do you
put it
plan
together.
on, who are you going to direct that to, the city
I was thinking
council?
Alderman Gay's committee first. I mean,
Okay.
I think it'd be helpful to have their buy-in, and then.
There
and
he
then we
is.
can send it to the council.
Jesse,
You're
your
on mute.
microphone.
You're on mute. So I'm
There
gonna
we go.
reopen the public hearing so we can hear from Jesse.
Hi, Jesse
Hi.
Morales, Executive Director for the OIC of Anne Arundel County. And I'm glad to be here. I've been listening to you guys. Obviously, I was on the YouTube, so you couldn't see me or hear me. But I was typing in the chat and emailing Miss Wellman the whole time. So glad to be here. And I just wanted to say, as I sent her an email, that thank you for all of the funding opportunities that you guys have given us. I relocated here from a bigger OIC in Wilson, North Carolina, to help grow this OIC. And obviously Mr. Green retired and we are growing. And I just wanted to say that if there is more funding for us, we would appreciate it. Since COVID happened and the pandemic, we annually enroll 50 participants that we service every year. And in our first quarter, we're already at 73 participants and counting. So it's working for us. We went 100% virtual with all of our program, all of our classes. We also added the Spanish GED because last year what I figured out was we had to turn away a lot of people because they didn't know English. But if you get a Spanish GED, it's the equivalent to an English speaking GED. So we added the Spanish GED this year, along with our other reentry services and our ESL classes and our job readiness classes. But we are being overwhelmed now because we're getting so many participants that are signing up. The number one issue that all nonprofits have is transportation, and we have eliminated that by going virtual and online. And also the people that don't have computers, we were able to get some funding from ACDS to buy Chromebooks that we issue out to the participants that don't have a computer at home. So it's a good problem to have, but our staff is now being overwhelmed by so many participants enrolling in our classes. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you.
That's a very good problem to have. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that tonight. We appreciate that.
Thank you guys for all that you do for us.
And welcome to Anne Arundel.
Glad to be here. I'm enjoying it.
Great. Thanks again for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So I'm going to close the public hearing again. I think we came to consensus about where we are. I mean, I think, you know, we can walk and chew gum, right? So we can pursue a request, to, you know, with Housing and Human Welfare. To me, it makes the most sense to route up through that committee to the city council. And at the same time, we absolutely should, you know, develop a relationship and rapport with the new planning director. It's very important.
Right.
So I think we should.
But we have to do both. Just have to do both at the same
Yeah.
time. We're not, and Terry, you know, to respond to you, we're not asking for permission from Mike Malinoff. We're just saying, we just want him to know what's going on. And he may have some history that'll help us.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Because he's been around for so
Well,
long.
I agree. But I would, because we've mentioned this more than once and talked about it a couple of times, and I don't know if Sally knew, but it's not a new concept, and the task force talked about it too. So
Yeah.
Right, but Sally's gone.
I know, but
but you know, if it is the case that, you know, an active decision is being made about what to do with that surplus land, I mean, I think it's important to, you know, put something in writing and have it on
Their
record.
radar that we
Yeah.
want to do
Right.
something.
And I think it should be on Mike's radar that we're interested in
Yeah.
doing that because
Right.
he's involved, you know, as a department head and all the, you know, stuff that goes on.
so can you brief him? If you brief him, that's, you know, that's the beginning.
I can brief him.
Yeah.
by
Is
myself.
that?
I just thought you guys would like to be involved, but
We do want to be, but not, I mean, just a heads up. So,
Teresa,
And
I
if-
feel like what I'm hearing from Terry is that, you know, there can be kind of a two-step type of conversation, right? There could be kind of a staff to staff level type of conversation, and then also a conversation with us. You know,
Yeah, I don't know if we would need to wait till our January meeting to have that conversation. If we
No.
could set something up in the interim, you know,
And I-
because we're not
yeah.
scheduled to meet in December. So unless we can organize something.
And that's
prior
where
to-
I'm hearing kind of the next steps is like
Yeah.
maybe between here and the January meeting, we write our letter or recommendation to the committee.
Yep.
You know, Teresa, that gives you some
you
time.
CC me and I can.
Yeah, that gives you some time to maybe
Share it
take
with
that and go over and
right.
have the conversations with Mike. And then in January, we have that. And then we've taken a couple of steps. We've built a little bit of consensus. We started to kind of shop this around some more and just really start kind of broadening out this conversation. So, and it's been great to see just the email exchange that just this commission has had, you know, in between meetings. And I think we should take
Right.
advantage of that.
Yeah.
Increasingly and make sure that we keep this conversation going.
Exactly. Yeah.
I really appreciate the conversation on this. So I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your input and your expertise and your help. So any further comments? If not, how about a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
And all second and all in favor?
Aye.
Thumbs up. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you all very much. Have a nice Thanksgiving and stay